I'm Janet Jones, author of Happiness Millionaire, Positive Images for a Rich and Powerful Life. And you are watching a walk and a talk for happiness seekers. With the rise in antidepressant pills year on year, I decided it was time to do something about this. So I help people to focus on happiness health all of the time rather than mental health when there's a problem. Now today's guest is Father Rodney. Now, Father Rodney has been the sort of village vicar for probably close to 20 years. He's a very wise man. Just about all of life's challenges and circumstances have found their way to his door. So we have some really engaging conversation, from forgiveness to how to live with life's challenges, how to overcome life's challenges. So I hope you enjoy this. Here's Father Rodney. Father Rodney, thank you very much for your time this afternoon, this grey afternoon. I really appreciate it. And as we were talking before, that we were going to talk about forgiveness. And obviously in the work that you do, you come across a lot of people facing life's challenges, of which there are many. And, you know, we kind of always want to be happy in our life as much as we possibly can. So maybe you have some insight as to how we can best deal with life's hurdles, whether it's forgiveness or any other thing that you can think of that you might want to impart some wisdom to people.
Okay.
Okay, think about that one then.
I think there's a tremendous amount of things within those categories of people's lives, and something that we all experience in one way or another. And it's often how we deal with them and what our resources are to deal with them in our own lives and our own experience and our own thoughts and our own principles, or whatever it is of life, I suppose. They all help to shape how we deal with these issues in life.
Yeah, so these issues and things that, you know, that people might be going through, and what kind of resources do you think would be helpful to people? I'm just coming a little bit.
I suppose many of the resources that people have to cope with life are things that they learn perhaps early on in life, which is sadly why most people don't cope with the problems of life.
Right.
And why they meet the challenges really unprepared and without the resources for them to be able to sort of make sense of them. And I'm sure that's part of the problem why so many people, particularly in these crises of death and bereavement and breakup and all those other things that go with them, don't actually cope at all. They have to learn when those things come along.
On the hoof kind of thing, isn't it?
And that isn't by any means the best way to do it. Although some things you can only learn by experience.
Yes,
you can only learn that experience.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily learn them from other people. They're things that you yourself had to come to terms with in some way or other. But none of them are perfect.
No, and do you think that's because we are all on our own journey, and therefore we individually have things that we must learn? Is that why we can't learn particularly from other people? I guess we can pick up tips and ideas, but ultimately...
I suppose we do always have to recognise that all of us are very different people. We've been exposed to very different experiences as we've grown up. Some people have had tremendous experiences that have helped to set them up for life. Others have actually had very good people to take the lead from in life. I think part of the problem in modern life is that very often people haven't had those things. They haven't grown up with some of the issues in life, and sometimes I do cynically blame parents sometimes for trying often to protect their children too much from facing the realities of life, which means that when those children grow up, they have never had to face them, and by that point they're in a far worse position to do so. I think.
So in what way, I mean, we do live, I think, in a very protective world at the moment, maybe a little bit overprotective, but we do need to
kind of get some of these coping strategies, because we can't be protected from everything. You know, you can't be protected from a relationship breakup, or, you know, like you were saying, the death of a loved one, because these things happen. So what, if you just come back a little bit, you know, like as far as grief and things go, you know, what if somebody in your life dies, but actually whilst they were alive you completely took them for granted, and maybe you weren't as nice as you could have been to that person? That then leaves you in a serious grieving place, would you say?
I think
Sometimes, not always. Maybe some people are glad. I don't know. I'm just cursing here.
if you take something like the death of a loved one, I mean, grief in that situation is filled with so many feelings of guilt and yes, guilt more than anything else, and not having the means to cope with that. And I suppose, again, part of the things that has increasingly happened, I mean, it didn't happen in my childhood period, but it does happen much more, is unfortunately there is this tendency of parents and adults to protect children from these things, not
emotions.
allowing them to be, excluding them from those events, or not talking to them at the time, and the end result is that they hit them older without having had that earlier experience, which would have helped them maybe recognise that it's acceptable.
Yes.
And it's not something unusual, and that people do feel the way, but people so often, adults particularly, tend to hide their feelings away from people to protect, and it's a mistake.
It is, isn't it? Because then what happens then is that person then does get older, you kind of feel cross that you were protected from things until you can understand. A lot of healing comes from understanding, as you know, there's a famous Bible quote, not that I want to quote the Bible in front of you, but you know, what's that, you know, walk a mile in someone else's shoes. And I think we need to do that, and that maybe that isn't a Bible quote, maybe I've just read it somewhere else.
I don't think it's a Bible quote, but it is the need to be able to be empathetic to people, and learn from watching and learning and as what other people are experiencing. Yes, I think that's, and
being able to put yourself into, and that's really difficult. I remember when you know, when my dad passed away tragically, and it took me years to get over that, and it wasn't until I learned so much more about my dad, what he went through from childhood to, you know, his final days, that I was able to then understand him. And it was through understanding him more I could put myself more in his shoes, not completely, and then reach that level of forgiveness.
And I suppose sometimes that adds compounds a little bit, because people then are filled with regret that they haven't actually known those things or shared those things and learnt from those things
whilst
in those earlier
they were
days.
alive. Absolutely.
Because either they haven't been shown them, or they haven't been shown how they can do that, and that's you know, it's another part of life, that the danger of overprotecting and not allowing in the right way people to learn from very young to participate. And the modern world runs away. We run away. I suppose being brought up in a different era, where the things of life were much more on display for people. I mean, I can remember very clearly my maternal grandmother, who had been diagnosed with cancer, and in the last weeks of her life she was brought to our house, and she was looked after in the front room of our house, and we used to go in and say good night to her. We saw her ill, we saw what was happening. I mean, she died in 1970, and I have a younger brother as well. So you know, we were sort of teenage. We're beginning, coming into teenage, and just have, and even when she died, she still remained in our house, and we still went in to say good night.
Yes, yeah.
And therefore, and I suppose what I learned from that was that living people are more dangerous than dead ones,
Yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah,
but
possibly.
it wasn't. But there was nothing frightening about
No.
it.
It's probably quite
It
peaceful.
was natural.
Yes,
It was
yeah.
peaceful and natural.
And then that
Um,
sets you up understanding this passage of time that we are on, that actually it is finite, and you know, we should enjoy it because we haven't got it for very long, really, you know.
It's a call to make the most of the lives we have, and I think there would always be. I think there will always be, even with the most, what I would say, well-adjusted people. I think there is always the two things. I mean, perhaps the fear of death itself, because obviously depends on what we believe. And what we believe, then it can mean the end of everything. You don't very often hear people, and I mean, when I'm dealing with things, don't very often people saying someone has died. You have lots of euphemisms.
You do.
Which avoids you
Yes.
having to mention the fact that of what has really happened.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because when my mum passed away, my daughter was the one that got the news first, and I was doing my very first motivational event, and she came up and said, "Mum, we've got to cancel the event," and she then said that my mum had had a heart attack. So I said, "Okay, well, we'll do this and then we'll get down to the hospital." Well, she didn't know that people recovered from heart attacks, and she thought that if she said she'd had a heart attack, I would understand that my mum, you know, had died. And actually, it was my sister that rang me later, and she said, "Oh, you know, has Iona told you about Mum?" And I said, "Well, yes." Did she tell you she died? I was like, "Oh, she didn't tell me that bit." And suddenly my room is filling up with all these people. But even then, I said to Iona, "Well, we still can't do anything about it. We'll carry on. Mum would want us to do this."
And I think that even for people of faith, nothing can really protect us from the human side of ourselves.
No.
And the sense of loss and the anxieties and things that are part of human life. If it did, we wouldn't be human. And I think that's so important. And to discourage people from pretending
that everything is rosy.
Yes,
yeah.
and life isn't like that.
No.
And the more you pretend, the less able you ultimately are to cope with the challenges, perhaps when they come to you. There's one of the things that I've come increasingly to believe is a quotation from the Bible quotation. And St. Paul says, "If our hope in Christ is for this life only, we of all people are most to be pitied." And I think he's wrong.
Right.
And I think he's wrong, because I think that faith is something which may well, and the scripture says may well, hold something for something after this life. But the most important thing is that it's something that we actually have and work with and live with in life.
Yes, yeah.
And rather than something that we hope for something afterwards.
Later.
No,
Yeah.
and I think they're learning to value the fact that this life is to be valued. It's not just simply something we have to go to in order to inherit something else.
No. And learning to value the ups and downs of life, not just value the ups of life, you know.
Yes, and the all learning experience. I mean, I suppose I would be challenged by some of my colleagues if I was to say that, to be honest, it wouldn't worry me too much if there was nothing after this life. And that's a strange thing for a priest to say, because the value of the faith I have is now.
It's serving you now.
It's serving me.
isn't it?
If there's more to it than that, that's wonderful. But that's not really where it really helps me now.
Yes, I get that actually. That's a really great point, because why wait until this bit's over? And like you say, you just say, "Oh, there's nothing." Well, actually, that mind, that belief could have served you through some challenging times. I know when I go through challenging times, I always hand my problems over to what I believe in, just to give me a break from them as much as anything. Just like, could you handle this just for the next half an hour? You know, because sometimes you need a break from your own worries and stresses, whether it's worries about your children or your job or, you know, whatever life is bringing you. So,
and I think it's a mistake, and I think sometimes again it is a fault within many parts of the Christian faith tradition these days. that doesn't take seriously the difficulties and problems of life and the problems of faith and the challenges that are there, but tries to gloss them over and pretend that they don't matter, but they do matter.
They do matter.
They do matter, and they have to be faced and they have to be dealt with, and we have to live a real life in a real world with real problems.
Yes,
And
yeah.
okay, faith can help you do that, What it can't do is take it away.
No, it can't.
And there are some people who would like to think that that's what it can do.
And nothing can really take it away, whether it's a pill or alcohol or, you know, strong narcotics or, you know, whatever that diversion is that people take to avoid the problems. Nothing can take it away.
And indeed,
except for you and dealing with it.
And in fact, these so-called things that help people supposedly get through from day to day are actually not helping them to do it. They're actually helping them sink deeper into the problems.
Yes, yeah.
Which in many cases tend to get worse rather than better because of that. Because they don't really want to face the challenges that they're there in their lives, and they found something that sort of makes them feel a little bit better, but it doesn't
or
actually
even
take
don't
it
know
away.
how to, you know.
Well, yes.
That's a lot of the problem. When my life so within the 6 years after my dad was died, and I was kind of had this internal life going on, but I was just doing what was expected me on the outside. So on the outside my life looked great, but actually inside it was a real challenge. And I always remember being told, you know, if you can't change it, change the way you think about it, which is fantastic advice, but I didn't know how to change the way I thought about it. And I think that's a big major problem, is people don't know how to resolve anxieties and stress and depression. There's knowledge that's missing, I think.
I brought somebody to stay at my vicarage a few years ago who I came across who had a pretty difficult early life, having been put into care and gone through the things that we now know an awful lot about care. And he'd now reached sort of the end of his late 30s, and he was going into his early 40s, and he'd coped with with alcohol, strings of broken relationships and all the rest of it. And I learned a great deal from him in a way that I'd never lived with it firsthand. And sadly he died with me at 41. And I suppose that was a great learning curve, because I lived firsthand with somebody who was in lots of ways in torment because of things that had happened to him or not had happened to him, and things that had sent him into the world unprepared and not able really to cope with the things that he needed to face, and a life sort of full of wrecks all the way through. And I suppose at the end it was very tragic to watch, and the hope was obviously that we were going to get him off things, and sadly he died before he got there. And but I learned a lot listening to him, and I learned a lot about how people cope sometimes with things that have happened to them when they had really no control over it at all.
And what kind of things did you learn most of all?
I keep disappearing off you.
So what kind of things did you learn most of all from that experience?
I learned a lot about someone with a very different life to the one I'd experienced. A life that hadn't had that rooted security. A life where they'd grown up without people around to help and to guide and to help them.
So without love, really.
In lots of ways. And I suppose part of his life was the searching for something which he actually never found,
which probably was love,
and just left lots of wrecks behind him in the process. And it was very sad, because he was someone who was very clever. He had great abilities, and nobody. But again, he'd learnt to hide the way he really felt. Because he couldn't go through life without that.
No, and by hiding it, that allows him to cope, because it was probably too painful for him to look in the face and deal with. that also would make him vulnerable too by doing that.
And I suppose if there was a privilege that went with it, and I mean I don't hold myself a privilege that went with it, is that I saw him at the low points, and he shared the low points,
Yes.
and I learned a lot from that. And sadly, it was too
Almost
late.
too late.
It was too late.
So he was starting to open up with you.
Yeah.
And then it was too late.
It was too late. And all of the making of it hadn't really been his fault. He'd been a child, and this is what it had led him to, and he'd had to survive. He'd learned to survive, but survival doesn't necessarily give you the tools to live.
No, it just gets you. It's like firefighting throughout life, isn't it?
Yes.
That's what I discovered about my dad, that he'd had a really tough childhood, and it's in the childhood actually where the making of us is, really, isn't it?
I think it is. I mean, I think there is possibilities of helping people that haven't had that thing in childhood, but for most people, that is where we learn the skills of living, and where we find the inner security that helps us face the challenges we're going to face later on.
Yes, because if you've had this abundance of love as a child, it's easier to grow up as an adult and give love to others, but also give love to yourself, because I guess you know what love is.
Yes, it's always strange that people quote from the scriptures, and they would say, Jesus says,
I'm not going to quote from the scriptures anymore.
No. Jesus, they remember the ones where Jesus said that we should love other people, or love other people. But Jesus also picks up from the old law and says, but you should love your neighbour as you love yourself.
As you love yourself, yeah.
And learning to love ourselves with all our faults that we sometimes only we know, is
or
actually
choose to see.
learning to live with them,
Yes.
and learning to accept them is actually really learning to cope with the things that come from it.
That's true. And I wonder, just think, this is off the top of my head, is that by learning to love ourselves, so if Jesus said, love your neighbour as you love yourself, therefore we need to learn to love ourselves in order to love our neighbour.
That's right. I think so. Yes, I think that.
So we have to do that, looking in the mirror and dealing with ourselves first, becoming, self-assured and respecting ourselves.
And the thing that people find the most struggle with, I think, is actually recognising that we're not perfect.
Yes. Which
But
is
we've got to make that we're
isn't
not
it? Yes.
perfect, not just that other people are not perfect.
And once we accept that we are not perfect, it's easier to accept the faults in other people because they're not perfect. So we don't take those things so personally.
Was they used to say there was only one perfect man and they crucified him. And I think there's a sense, just a reminder. And unfortunately, I do think again today, and so many things, this quest for perfection, and the people who give up on the quest of perfection end up on the quest for, what would you call it, destruction, I suppose.
Yes, yeah. So by saying that, you're saying we should actually seek perfection, or because that kind of goes against accepting ourselves and our faults, though.
But I think there's an acceptance of ourselves with our imperfections and things that allows us to grow. But it does mean accepting ourselves as we are, and not like we'd like to think we were.
Yeah.
Think we are.
I am 5'1". I no point me thinking I'm 5'6".
No.
Yeah.
And that applies to lots of things. And learning to accept and to recognise that. And that's why Christian faith is all full of forgiveness. But people sometimes, they will forgive others, but they won't forgive themselves. They won't let go of some of those things that can't be changed.
That's true, and we get hooked. Oh, why did I say that? If you've said something and it ends a relationship, whatever, why did I say that?
And having to, and it's part of having to accept our we don't get everything right, and we do make a mess of things, and that's part of what human life's like. It's learning from those things, and hopefully we perhaps don't lose the scars of what those have been, but if we've learned something from them, the scars are worth having.
They are, and their scars soften with age as well, don't they? They're never
It's amazing
quite
how many people, though, particularly with the relationship side, says he who is single and determined, relationship side, is that they sometimes don't learn from the breakup of the relationships they've had. They just don't learn from it, and they go on making the same mistakes.
Which is usually from blaming and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And
they don't recognise. They can't see the things in them that help to contribute towards what happened.
Yeah.
And therefore, when we don't learn, we continue
doing it, don't we?
It's a continuous pattern.
Yeah.
It's a bit like the whole pattern of the world. You know, when is the world going to learn that you can run as many wars as you like, but you don't? It's not the wars that solve the problem. It's what happens afterwards.
That's right. Yes.
It's the peace that sorts it out.
Yes.
Blessed are the peacemakers, not the peace lovers.
Right, because it's the peacemakers who are taking
who take action in order to make peace, whereas the peace lovers will sometimes accept everything to avoid there being anything other than peace.
Yeah, because there's black and white all the time, isn't it? These things run side by side. So if you want a peaceful relationship or a peaceful life of any description, you need to stay conscious and work at it. And it doesn't. Life, we're not born and then we sit down, we live for 80 years and then die. There's a lot of work in between that. I heard a great poem actually called The Dash, and it was about the dash in between. So the year you're born, the year you die, but actually it's about the dash in between. Well, that's clever. I would love to be able to recite it to you. But
I like that idea. Yes, what goes on between whatever year it was and whatever year it ends. Yes. And sadly, some people, there's nothing much between those two.
No.
People who don't develop their own gifts and abilities and things, and or have, not the incentive to do anything about it, and that's also another sadness about it, because so often there are so many people with so much potential and so much, but maybe. Again, perhaps in younger life, they've never been encouraged to do things with that, and therefore they've never developed even the best of the smallest part of their potential.
Yes.
They've just accepted that this is what life's like. This is what life's like, and are prepared to put up with and accept things that really we shouldn't accept. But it's easier to do so than it is to challenge them.
It doesn't really bring joy, though, does it?
No, it doesn't.
No,
it doesn't.
No,
it doesn't at all.
Joy comes from making the most of that dash, really, and learning about yourself and stepping up and making changes.
I think so, yes. And yes, there's a saying, and I can't remember it closely. It's something about accepting the things you cannot change. I just can't bring it to mind.
Lord, help me accept the things I cannot change, and something like the courage to change the things I can,
or something like that. That principle, yes. And I think in life, I think that is an important thing. It's accepting ourselves as we are, but also accepting the things that can be changed and working to change them.
Yes.
Or allow ourselves to be changed. And sometimes indirectly changing other people's lives at the same time. Yes.
I wonder if it's possible to change your own life and actually not change people's lives around you. Because we all affect one another.
I suppose it's not.
I
suppose it's not, because we as human beings, as human beings, of course, we live in a social environment.
I wonder if we have a more short attention span these days, and I don't know. Maybe we're more, living in the moment, which is a good thing in many ways, but the seeds we're sowing, we're pulling them up too quickly before the roots get to be taken.
We sometimes do give up to. People do tend to give. If something hasn't worked instantly, then it's given up as something that doesn't work.
Yes.
And that applies, I think, in all sorts of aspects. And yet the past message, what used to be that, if you don't succeed, you try again. And you keep trying and you keep working at something, and you'll get something. And something will come from it.
Yes, yeah.
But there's something about modern life that is about instant.
instant gratification.
in
isn't
some
it?
way or other. It has to be now.
Mm.
It's no good when 5 years time is no good. It has to be now.
Yes, yeah.
And if it isn't now, then there's something wrong.
Mm. Mm.
And people, I think sometimes they lose. I think they lose the will to battle with that. I think
Yeah.
they give up too easily.
Yeah. And if you're not finding fulfillment, say in your relationship right now, then you start to believe, and I put myself in this same category, you start to feel you'll never find it then. Whereas, can you find fulfillment within a relationship? You know, I have friends now, relationships are getting older, and they change, as you were just saying.
Oh, yes,
So it's
yes,
about finding
yeah.
the new in each kind of situation.
I think so too. Yes, I think so. I mean, just as you change yourself in life as you get older, you hopefully become wiser, but some become more,
Hopefully, yeah,
some
hopefully.
become more foolish. I have to say.
Yeah.
Um,
But sometimes
because
foolish is more fun.
But foolish is more
Yeah,
foolish is
yeah.
not. Yes, I could go with that.
Yeah.
Foolish is a bit more. But yes, I think it's about not stopping living and not stopping facing these things and not sort of just allowing it to wash over you. I think there is in life, if we part of the signs of life is what did they say, the sign of life is growth.
Yeah.
And whatever
that's true,
age we
isn't it?
are,
Yeah.
I'm always I'm so impressed, I'm amazed at some of some elderly people that I've come across over the years who have not been content to just have what they have, to be what they've been and have what they have, and who late on in life suddenly go and do new training and new
Correct.
courses
I
and
know.
do it for the sheer devilment
Yes,
of it.
yeah. Just because
and
you
learn
can.
to do new skills and don't accept the fact that getting old means gradually just sitting back and
On the perch.
fading away until you drop off.
Yeah.
And I think there's something very important about that as well. You know, we are growing and changing all the way
All the
through life,
time.
right the way to our last breath.
Yeah.
We're dealing with things and facing things, or we're trying to run away from them because we're
Yeah.
content with what we had.
Yes.
And
So-
a bit anxious about where
Where we're
change
going.
might lead us.
Yes. And that's the thing with change, isn't it? So life is always changing. But our mind seems to want to keep us at this time in life when it was good then.
Or when we think it
Or when
was.
we think it was.
Well, and we sort and false,
Because you only ever remember the good bits,
false,
don't you?
false memory
Yes.
false memory is a great curse on all of us,
yes, yeah.
because we look back and sometimes we don't see actually what it was. Sometimes other people have to remind us that it wasn't quite like that.
Yes, yeah.
And we have to accept the fact that sometimes our memory plays tricks with us. Because it tries to leave us only with the nice things.
Yes,
It doesn't want anything negative,
No.
and yet negative is.
It's
part
not
of
always
learning.
bad, is it? Yes,
It's
yeah.
part of the. It's part of that tension of life that keeps us growing, I suppose. I think more than anything else, it is recognising and accepting that we don't ever arrive at a standstill. If we've arrived at a standstill, then something is wrong.
Yes, yeah.
And even if it's a contented standstill, there's something wrong because there's a tension in life gone, and that means we're not living. We're simply
I
existing.
like that. Yes, a tension in life has gone. Contentment, it is nice in one respect, but then not in another. It kind of, you know, it's a bit of a paradox, really.
And I suppose when
Contentment.
people, I mean, now at my age, obviously looking to possibility, looking to retirement and things. Now you can look at retirement as a thing that opens the door to new things, or you can look at it as rounding off what
shutting.
you've already had.
Yeah.
And I must admit that, you know, in these last few years, you're thinking through, you know, when I stop doing the things I do, and you know, what is going to be the purpose of living?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
What am I going to do in order to make that final part of life worth living? I'm not bothered how long it lasts.
Yes, yeah.
I have no great longing to live to a great old age. But
It's
then
just
again, that's
having
not in my
purpose
hands.
No,
It's not
and
in
it's
my
having
hands.
purpose in the time that you do have. And also retirement is very much a man-made structure anyway. It's been an age that's been given to us, hasn't it? So
I quite resent it in some way sometimes that in fact we still continue to put shutters on use retirement as shutters and not emphasising that people go on from there. That retirement isn't the end. It's the end of one phase of the life that you had to have to do one thing, but it's an opening of a door to other things.
I think it should be called transition, personally.
Yes, I think
Shouldn't
so.
be retirement, just sounds like. But then I'm the same with mental health. I think mental health should be called happiness health, because it's about focusing on the solution, not the problem. You know, let's work out the solution. So same with retirement. Well, let's work out what the solution to that next phase is, where I'm going to find my purpose, rather than, like you're saying, this rounding off. I do think with my dad, he was made redundant at the age of 61 and then died at the age of 63. And I think that period of time, he lost his purpose. You know, because of it being redundancy and even not retirement, it was like this forced emptiness for him, really. You know, 61, well, what do you do at 61? You know, I think he had too much time on his hands, and he'd lost purpose to his days.
Yeah, I can see that, and I think that's it.
Can you just try and tap into your wisdom and think of something, how we can wrap this up now for people to, I guess, make the most of living of life's ups and downs?
Oh dear. Summarising things.
Okay.
I think it is the fact that we have this gift of life, and it doesn't finish till it ends.
Yeah. Ain't over till the fat lady sings.
It isn't over till it ends.
Yeah.
And it's a great gift of life, whatever age we are, and we should never undervalue what we are and what we can do and what we can be, and what we can continue to learn and experience, and what we can share with others, I suppose. I think that maybe doesn't answer the question you've put me, but I think that's part of learning to value yourself for who you are.
Which brings us back to the self-acceptance that we were talking about
and
earlier.
learn to recognise your faults and the weaknesses, and that's fine, but not letting them destroy the positive things that you actually have to offer.
Yes. Yeah.
Just being more aware. And I suppose as you get older, you become more aware of the second, become more aware of yourself as you are. Sometimes sadly, but forget what you have to offer as well.
Yeah. And I guess when you're younger, you're so busy trying to fit in and be like everyone else, that actually that's the great thing about getting older, because you do lose the need in many ways to be like that. You know, you grow into your own skin, as they say.
And I think I think that for me the way of faith is very important, because it isn't something that's shaped by age. It isn't something that's shaped by experience as such. It's something which is that's growing up as part of you, and it has helped to shape your outlook on life and the things that you do, and that never doesn't go
away.
Should never go away.
No. No.
And it's always a positive thing.
Yeah.
Or at least I always feel it's a very positive thing.
So it's good to hold that in your heart and use it whilst you're alive.
Whilst you're alive, yes, and be thankful for the life you've got with all its ups and downs, as a gift.
Yeah.
As a gift.
Which can seem really ironic when life is a challenge, isn't it? To kind of go, I know this is a gift, but it's a really tough gift right now.
Sufficient unto the day are the problems thereof, but also sufficient unto the day are the gifts and opportunities that are there with it. And that's what keeps us young, and that's what keeps us the people we are, that still have something valuable to offer to the world.
Yeah, marvellous.
Okay.
That's lovely. Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed that, and don't forget to watch the other interviews in this series, and of course share with your family and friends. Now, as a happiness seeker, I want to help you to find the answers to the challenges that you are facing, either at work, at home, or in school. So do subscribe to my channel and add your comments in the comments section below. If you have any questions, then if I don't have the answer, I will find an expert who does. If your question is too personal, then my email is janet@happinessmillionaire.com. You see, I believe that together, if we focus on happiness health, we can change the world. I'm Janet Jones, leading the way to a happier day. It's tacky, I know, but it's cute.